The blind beggar heard the sounds in the basement, a young girl's frightened breathing, two soldiers' heavy boots. Yusuf couldn't see, but years of street life had taught him to read sounds. The girl was young, maybe 17, trembling with fear. The soldiers were aggressive, hunting. There! Someone hiding in the corner. Yusuf's white eyes couldn't see the darkness, but he heard the girl's panicked breath. The soldiers were approaching her. Please, I haven't hurt anyone. I'm just... A slap sound. The girl's crying stopped. Are you a virgin? One soldier asked in Hebrew, then translated to Arabic. The question itself was a threat. Yusuf's blind eyes couldn't see, but his hands found his walking stick. Subscribe now, because what this sightless man does in the next 3 minutes will prove that the clearest vision comes from the heart, not the eyes. Yusuf had been living in this basement for 2 weeks, a forgotten blind beggar sleeping in corners that sighted people overlooked. The building had been bombed months ago, and the basement became home to those society had abandoned, the disabled, the homeless, the invisible. He knew every corner by touch and sound, knew where the rubble piles were, where the support beams stood, where the stairs led up to street level. His blindness had forced him to create detailed mental maps of spaces through non-visual senses. Now those senses were telling him something terrible was happening. 2 soldiers, 1 young girl, the kind of situation where a girl's innocence, her virginity, her purity, made her a target rather than something soldiers should protect. Please, I'm just 17, the girl was saying, her voice breaking. I was looking for my family. I didn't mean to. 17 and pure, one soldier said, his voice carrying the sick satisfaction of someone who saw innocence as something to destroy. That's rare now. Most girls your age have already been touched, but you're still untouched, aren't you? The question made Yusuf's stomach turn. He'd heard this before, in different wars, different occupations. The specific targeting of young virgins, the particular cruelty directed at girls who represented innocence in a world losing it rapidly. Yusuf couldn't see the girl's face, but he heard her terrified silence, the kind of silence that meant yes, that meant vulnerability, that meant she understood exactly what these soldiers intended. He moved toward the sounds, his walking stick tapping softly, his blind eyes useless but his other senses hyper-alert. Who's there? One soldier called out in Arabic, his weapon probably raised toward the sound. Just an old blind beggar, Yusuf said, his voice humble, non-threatening. I sleep here. I didn't mean to disturb anyone. I'll leave. He heard the soldiers relax slightly. A blind beggar wasn't a threat, wasn't even worth their attention. But Yusuf was counting steps, measuring distances, creating an acoustic map of where everyone stood. The girl was against the far wall, maybe 4 meters away. One soldier was between him and her, maybe 2 meters. The second soldier was to the left, 3 meters, near what Yusuf remembered as a support beam. Get out, old man, the closer soldier said. This doesn't concern you. Yusuf stopped, his blind eyes staring at nothing. The girl. Let her go. She's just a child, the soldiers laughed. A blind man giving orders? You can't even see what's happening here. Walk away before you get hurt. But you haven't seen the most incredible part yet. What the soldiers didn't understand was that Yusuf's blindness wasn't the disability they assumed. Years of living without sight had developed his other senses to extraordinary levels. He could hear heartbeats, sense movement through air displacement, judge distances through sound echoes. More importantly, blindness had taught him to fight differently. In darkness, sighted people became as helpless as him, and Yusuf had learned long ago how to create darkness. I said, let her go, Yusuf repeated, and before the soldiers could respond, he struck his walking stick hard against the basement's single light bulb. The bulb shattered. Complete darkness flooded the basement. For the soldiers, sudden blindness was disorienting, terrifying. For Yusuf, it was home advantage. He moved fast, using his memorized acoustic map. The closer soldier was cursing, fumbling for a flashlight. Yusuf's stick found the man's knee with practiced precision, the exact angle to cause maximum pain and disable movement. The soldier screamed, dropped. His weapon clattered away. The second soldier was shouting, firing blindly. But Yusuf was already moving, using sound to dodge, using his stick to strike at the muzzle flash location. He felt the impact, metal on flesh, heard the satisfying sound of weapon dropping. "Run!" Yusuf shouted to the girl in Arabic. "The stairs are to your right, 5 meters. Follow my voice. Run!" He heard her stumble, find the wall, start moving. Good. His goal wasn't to win a fight. Blind beggars didn't win fights against armed soldiers. His goal was to buy her time to escape. The second soldier had recovered his weapon. Yusuf heard the safety click off, heard the barrel swinging toward him. "You're dead, blind man," the soldier snarled. Yusuf smiled in the darkness. "We're all dead eventually, but that girl isn't. Not today. Wait, don't miss this crucial detail, because what the girl does next will determine whether the blind beggar's sacrifice means anything." The girl, her name was Heba, Yusuf would never learn, had reached the stairs. She could escape now, run into the street, disappear before the soldiers recovered. But she heard the weapon cocking, heard the threat to the blind man who had just saved her virginity, her innocence, her life. And she couldn't leave him to die alone. Heba grabbed a piece of rubble, concrete and rebar, heavy, sharp-edged. She couldn't see in the darkness any better than the soldiers, but she could hear, could follow sounds. She threw the rubble toward the soldier's voice with all her strength. The impact sound was wet and hard. The soldier cursed, his weapon discharging wildly as he fell. Bullets ricocheted off concrete, missing everyone through sheer luck. "Go!" Yusuf shouted. "Don't waste what I'm giving you. Go!" But Heba was already moving back down the stairs, feeling along the wall until she found Yusuf's arm. "Not without you," she said fiercely. "You saved me. I'm not leaving you to die." "I'm blind," Yusuf protested, even as she pulled him toward the stairs. "I'll slow you down. They'll catch us both." "You see better in darkness than they do," Heba replied, dragging him up the stairs. "And I can see better in light than you can. Together, we have a chance. Alone, we're both dead." Behind them, the soldiers were recovering, calling for backup on radios, cursing in Hebrew about the blind beggar and the virgin girl who fought back. Here's what's going to absolutely amaze you about their escape through the city. Once they emerged from the basement into daylight, their roles reversed. Heba became the eyes. Yusuf became the local knowledge. She described what she saw. He told her where to go based on sounds and memories of the city before he'd lost his sight. "3 soldiers at the checkpoint ahead," Heba whispered. "Turn left," Yusuf replied immediately. "There's an alley, too narrow for vehicles. Follow it 200 meters, then right at the mosque ruins." Heba guided him through the turn, their pace faster now, her young legs compensating for his old ones, his knowledge compensating for her unfamiliarity with escape routes. They moved like this for 20 minutes, her eyes, his knowledge, their shared desperation creating a functional unit. Several times they had to hide, Heba pulling Yusuf into shadows while patrols passed, his blindness actually an advantage because he didn't instinctively look toward danger and give away their position. "Why did you help me?" Heba asked during one hiding stop, both of them pressed into a destroyed shop front. "You're blind. You could have stayed silent. They would never have known you were there." Yusuf's white eyes stared at nothing as he answered. "I had a daughter once, before the war, before I lost my sight. She was 16 when soldiers came to our village. They took her and 2 other young girls, virgins, all of them, specifically targeted because of their purity." His voice was steady, but underneath Heba heard bottomless grief. "I tried to stop them. That's how I lost my sight. They beat me, damaged my optic nerves beyond repair, left me to die. My daughter, they kept her for 3 days before she managed to escape. But by then, she wasn't the same. The innocence they'd stolen, the trauma they'd inflicted. She couldn't survive it. She took her own life 6 months later." Heba felt tears streaming down her face as she listened to this blind beggar explain why he'd risked everything for a stranger. "When I heard those soldiers ask if you were a virgin," Yusuf continued, "I heard the same tone they used with my daughter, the same targeting of innocence, the same cruelty that sees purity as something to destroy rather than protect. I couldn't save my daughter, but I could save you. That's all that mattered." "I'm so sorry," Heba whispered, "about your daughter, about everything." Don't be sorry, Yusuf said. Be alive. Be free. Keep your innocence inside you even if they try to take it. That's how we honor the ones we couldn't save, by refusing to let others be lost the same way. But wait until you hear what happens when they finally reach safety. It will redefine what family means. They reached a safe house run by a network that specialized in hiding vulnerable people. Young women, children, anyone targeted specifically for their innocence or weakness. The woman who answered the door, Sister Mariam, took one look at Heba's torn dress and Yusuf's blind eyes and understood immediately. "Come in, quickly," she said, pulling them inside. "You're safe here." The house held 7 other young women, all between 16 and 20, all survivors of attempts to violate their innocence. They formed a community of shared trauma and protection, helping each other heal while arrangements were made to relocate them to safer areas. Heba was welcomed immediately, given clean clothes, food, medical attention, but she refused to let Yusuf leave. "He saved me," she told Sister Mariam, "not just my life, my innocence, my purity, the thing those soldiers wanted to steal. He protected it when he couldn't even see me, when he had every reason to stay hidden. He deserves safety too." Sister Mariam looked at the blind beggar who had protected a young virgin at enormous personal risk and made a decision. "He can stay. We have a small room in the back. It's not much, but it's safer than streets or basements." Over the following weeks, while arrangements were made to relocate Heba to relatives in Turkey, she and Yusuf formed an unlikely bond. She became his eyes, describing the world he could no longer see. He became her counselor, helping her process trauma, teaching her that what had almost happened didn't define her, that her innocence remained intact because she'd fought back, because someone had protected her. "You're still pure," Yusuf would tell her during their talks, "not because of what didn't happen to your body, but because of what lives in your heart, your kindness, your courage, your refusal to leave me to die. That's the real innocence. That's what they can never take." The other young women in the house gravitated toward Yusuf too. His blindness made him non-threatening. His fatherly wisdom helped them heal. He couldn't see their faces, couldn't judge their appearances, could only know them through their voices and hearts. "You see us better than anyone," one girl told him, "because you see what we are, not what happened to us. Here's the part that will stay with you long after you finish this story." When Heba finally left for Turkey, she made Yusuf a promise. "I'm going to study medicine. I'm going to specialize in helping trauma survivors, especially young women whose innocence was targeted. And I'm going to make sure that blind veterans like you get better care than society gives you." 3 years later, she fulfilled that promise. She returned with medical credentials and opened a clinic specifically for 2 populations, trauma survivors and disabled veterans. The 2 groups she'd learned could heal each other, survivors learning courage from veterans who fought despite disabilities, veterans learning purpose from survivors who needed protection. Yusuf became her first employee, a counselor who understood both trauma and disability, whose blindness became his greatest asset in helping young women who couldn't bear to be looked at by sighted men after what they'd survived. "I can't see you," he would tell new patients, "so you're safe with me. You can talk without being judged by how you look, by what happened to your body. We can focus on healing your heart." His approach worked remarkably well. Young women who had been violated, who had lost their innocence to violence, who struggled with shame and self-blame, found comfort in talking to someone who literally couldn't see them, who knew them only through their voices and hearts. Heba documented everything, publishing research about trauma recovery that highlighted how Yusuf's methods helped patients heal faster. His story, the blind beggar who protected a virgin in darkness, became known in medical and humanitarian circles as proof that healing sometimes requires unconventional approaches. But more than that, Heba made sure Yusuf's daughter was remembered. She named the clinic after her, Amira's Light, a clinic for those who fight in darkness. "Your daughter's death inspired you to save me," Heba explained to Yusuf at the clinic's opening. "Now let her memory inspire others. Every girl we help here is proof that Amira's suffering wasn't meaningless, that it created ripples of protection for countless others." Here's what their story teaches us that we desperately need to remember. Society looks at blind beggars and sees helplessness, inability, people to pity or ignore. Yusuf proved that the strongest vision comes from the heart, not the eyes. That protecting innocence doesn't require seeing it, just recognizing its value. His choice to fight in darkness saved Heba's virginity, her innocence, her sense of self, but it also saved him from the slow death of believing disability made him useless, gave him purpose that transcended his blindness. Heba's choice to honor his sacrifice by dedicating her career to helping trauma survivors created ripples that have now helped thousands. Every young woman who regains her sense of worth after violation, every virgin who receives protection before trauma occurs, every survivor who learns that innocence lives in hearts rather than bodies, they're all proof that one blind man's impossible courage in a dark basement changed the world. The soldiers who tried to violate Heba never faced justice. They continued their patrols, probably targeted other young women, probably succeeded in stealing innocence that no one protected. But they didn't destroy Heba, didn't break her spirit, didn't win. Because a blind beggar who society had forgotten remembered what it meant to be human, chose to be the father his daughter needed when she had no one, proved that you don't need eyes to see evil, you just need a heart that refuses to ignore suffering even when ignoring would be safer. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that disability doesn't mean inability, and that protecting innocence is worth any sacrifice, then hit that subscribe button right now. Because in a world that often forgets to protect the vulnerable, we need more stories about people who couldn't see but still fought to preserve purity in a place trying to destroy it. Share this story. Let it challenge assumptions about disability and heroism. Remember that the blind beggar on the street might be the one who saves innocence when everyone else walks past. The people society considers helpless sometimes become the most essential protectors. That the strongest vision comes from recognizing that some things, like protecting young women's purity from those who would violate it, matter more than personal safety. Every day, in basements and shelters and forgotten corners, there are Yusufs living with disabilities that society treats as disqualifications from mattering. They struggle with limitations, pain, and being invisible to the world. But some of them, too many to count, hear innocence threatened and decide that blindness doesn't mean permission to ignore evil. Yusuf's sight never returned. The damage to his optic nerves was permanent, but he never regretted losing his vision, because what he lost in sight, he gained in purpose. The ability to protect young women whose innocence made them targets, whose virginity made them vulnerable, whose purity needed defenders who couldn't be tempted by what they couldn't see. 5 years after the rescue, Yusuf received a letter from Heba, now married to a good man who respected her, starting a family, living the life that soldiers had tried to steal. She'd given birth to a daughter and wanted Yusuf to know her name, Amira, after his lost daughter. Your daughter's death inspired you to protect my innocence, Heba wrote. Now my daughter will grow up in a world where blind men fight in darkness to protect young women's purity. Where disability doesn't mean inability to be a hero. Where the love you had for Amira continues saving others through the ripples of that single moment when you refused to let my virginity be stolen. Yusuf couldn't read the letter. His blindness prevented that. But when Sister Miriam read it aloud to him, his white eyes filled with tears. Not from grief this time, but from something more powerful, the knowledge that his daughter's death, his blindness, his desperate fight in a dark basement, all of it had meaning. All of it had created light that continues spreading even in the darkest places, where bullets missed, but hearts didn't.